So, the article for today is titled What Makes a Great Player Great? It's by Paulo Vitor da Rosa, as we discussed previously, and this was an article that he got the idea out of a discussion in about the World Magic Cup, and he actually came to the conclusion that it's quite hard to know exactly what makes a great player great. Is it consistency? Is it formulating good plans? Is it making good plays? Is it whatever? Is it being very good at bluffing, at mind games? There are definitely a lot of possibilities out there for you to shine with your individuality, I guess. But there are some key factors that that are discussed in this article that you probably should take that into consideration. So there are a few loose points, but I think that the main one that Paulo Vitor highlights is they have a plan. Okay, there are some people that argue that a great player is one that makes very few mistakes, and while making very few mistakes is kind of a trademark of good players, like that consistency, that's actually not common across all the great players out there. So even Paulo, he thinks that is a player that makes a lot of mistakes. So he actually argues that it's more about understanding the fundamentals very well, understanding what's going on in a game at a very fundamental level, and developing good reasoning behind the kind of plays that you actually do, right? Because these fundamentals are actually what unify your game plan, and we will see that a bit later. But these fundamentals unify your game plan and also add to a bit to your consistency and enable you to essentially extrapolate from specific situations, and that you don't need to be constantly on the grind to be a good player, right? On a regular basis. A great player is who knows how to win a game and formulates a plan to get that desired outcome. So since you have the good fundamentals, you're able to design a plan that is actually good, that will get you to the ultimate objective, which is winning the game at hand. And actually, there's a counter argument, not a counter argument, but the other side of the coin is actually, if you don't have this fundamental knowledge of how magic works, you'll have systematic errors. So something that he preaches in a way is that you might still do a lot of mistakes, but those are not systematic mistakes, are not chronic, right? It's just it's spot mistakes that you can actually correct from, right? So I guess by understanding the fundamentals, you're able to get a bit around the limitations of not being as consistently with your plays. Okay, so they have a plan, and this plan encompasses everything. It's not only, and it has multiple layers like an onion, right? It's not only about the single play that you're making. It's also about the turn that you have. It's also about the full game that you're playing, and the plan that you're employing in that game. It's also about the tournament. It's about your career as professional Magic player or as a Magic player in general. So there are multiple stages of this onion, and unifying the plan across all these stages is what Paulo argues, and I can definitely see that why that is, as distinguishing a great player. It's also important to note that this is not a static plan, right? The plans actually change depending on the game state. There are a series of inputs that inform the plan, and those inputs might change as time passes, like as we were seeing during our previous match, so for those who are watching this offline, I was playing rogues against a control deck, and we started by trying to be aggro. Ezer, welcome. We're reviewing an awesome article. I think that you will enjoy this, and you will be able to establish a lot of parallels against the games you play, like Apex. Since I know that you're also a very competitive player, or at least a very good one. So yeah, if you're watching this offline, so I was playing rogues against control again, and that I was starting by trying to be a lot of quite aggressive, but my opponent was completely ruining that plan with removal and actually effective and cheap removal. So I had to switch gears and try to protect our Into the Stories as best as possible, and that card advantage actually got us the win for sure. It was huge. So being able, I'm not saying I'm a great player at all, but still, yet, but still, there's a lot to be learned in those instances, right? Being able to have a plan and switch that plan when it doesn't work. And Rogues is actually a good deck to practice that sort of stuff. So yeah, it goes across deck building, mulligan, sideboarding, and again, everything else. Everything goes towards their game plan, and that game plan is informed by what they expect to be the metagame and so on. So it should strive to have this unified plan, I guess. Vision, it's informed by the vision of how they win the game, of course. And their plan or goal changes depending on how things are going, as we discussed. If you know your plan, you know what's important, and then you know what you should prioritize. And then he actually goes through a simple situation, but it's the same situation depending on what you prioritize. I guess that's the takeaway. It can be, you can act completely different. Like you're in this situation, which is like they attack with a 5/5 trampler, you have a 3/3, a 0/1 and a 2/1. So it depends. Are you expecting to attack back on their turn? Are you expecting to, because like they will play something but you have removal for that something? Or do you expect to, are you losing if you let 5 damage go in, so you will block? Is the 0/1 block good enough? So you need to assess all those situations. And the thing about a great player is also, we discuss a lot in this stream heuristics, right? But heuristics get you there like 80-90% of the time, right? So being able to distinguish that additional 10-20% whatever situations when you should deviate from the heuristic, that's actually very good, right? That's where these kind of players shine. So but you cannot do that like, if you know that you should play 17 lands in your limited deck, if you know that you should try to have a curve with I don't know, 4 to 8 2-drops or whatever, depending on the kind of deck that you're building, that already gets you there. But if you don't have a good grasp of the fundamentals, you won't ever be able to deviate from that situation. And yeah, also, if you don't have a good understanding of fundamentals, the hard part, an additional hard thing to do is to know what your goal should be. Like, how do you actually, you know that you want to win the game, like you want to celebrate and get to the next round, but you will win the game somehow. And so what's that goal? Great players also have good reasons for their plays. And again, this goes back to this unifying game plan. So every single decision should feed itself towards that game plan. If you make a play that I think is wrong, but your reasoning makes sense, that actually in this case, right, that impresses more Paulo than if you have if you do the right play, but you don't know why, or you have the wrong reasons for it, right? So it's more important for you to, and this goes back to those situations where you are faced with a decision between like a 60% win rate or 40% win rate chance, and actually if you made the play that would give you 40% win rate in a vacuum, or given the situation up until that point, that play might actually win you the game, okay? But it doesn't mean that the other play was wrong, right? Because on the long term, the 60% win rate gameplay play would actually be better for you, or will be better for you. So having the good reason, a good reasoning behind that, even though the play might not lead you to the optimal situation, that's very important. That's something that Paulo seems to value a lot, and I think that it does make sense. You have the right mindset and your mistakes are much easier to fix, and this gets us back to this discussion, chronic mistakes or like systematic, chronic mistakes. I think that's what the name that Paulo gives to them. So chronic mistakes are those mistakes that are due to the fact that you don't have a good grasp of fundamentals. And there are pointed mistakes, so mistakes that you make from time to time, that are derived from the fact that, well, you might have good reasoning, but you might have gotten distracted, or your emotions might have gotten in the way, and you can work on those things. But you still, that does not invalidate the fact that you have a good grasp of your game, of Magic, I would say. So let me actually read this message from Sigma. I think it's quite interesting. That second paragraph is something that sticks for me for more than 20 years. The other is, winning with 1 point of life is the same as winning with a clean sheet. Exactly. Managing damage is always trickier, but if you have a plan and you know the opponent's deck, exactly, especially in competitive play, yeah, in constructed, it's really valuable. You must be ready to sacrifice your board and or your life to manage your goal while controlling the other player. That's a very good point. And for example, even if you're playing against Burn in Modern or whatever, well, Burn has this thing that it's this philosophy of fire, or fire philosophy. I think it's philosophy of fire that they call this, which is like each card should account for 3 points of damage. Okay, so typically you try to get away from to have more than 6 points of life or something like that, depending on how many cards our opponent has and stuff like that. So because they have burn spells, like Lightning Bolt is a 1 mana burn spell that essentially does you 3 damage to your face. At least typically that's the plan for burn. So, but at some point you might be faced with a situation that you have a goal, but in order to reach that goal, you need to go lower than 6 life. You need to risk that. You need to play to your outs at some point, right? If you don't have a plan that enables you to have more than 6 life or more than 3 life, you probably should direct your plan and generate a plan that works if your opponent doesn't have the kind of the exact spell that kills you, right? So it's a key component of designing your plan, because it is a design process, right? You're designing your main deck, you're designing your sideboard, you're designing like even what tournaments you get into, all that stuff. So yeah. All that stuff, you should also take into consideration playing to your outs, right? Doing the best effort. That's also something that makes me not really prone to conceding the game too early, because I want to actually at the very least go through the motions, try to understand how the rest of the game goes, and take advantage of that experience and try to understand, oh, but we actually got into a situation where plan X might give me the win. I would have a 5% chance of winning. That's still winnable. Okay, so in terms of mistakes, as I was saying, be a great player and make a ton of mistakes as long as you make your reasons make sense. We already saw this, and I actually have here a small reflection. I tend to add this stuff to these article reviews. So yeah, I'm definitely not a great player yet. The plan is to become one, but I think that having I think I have a reasonable good grasp of strategy, general strategy. I don't know what are the meta decks that well. I don't know all the combat tricks in limited. Well, at some point I start knowing, but there are some definitely a lot of things that I don't really understand. But yeah, I definitely do a lot of mistakes, and this is something that you can actually try to work on through deliberate practice. So being really with your mind set into the game, try to think a bit about every single decision, and because if you do that early on, your gameplay will actually get faster, so you will do some automatic plays that are good, that make sense, so some intuitive plays. I guess that's a good thing. Yeah, exactly. Knowing the meta, I'm starting to get a better grasp of that. Not an amazing one, but at some point, like 3 months or 4 months ago, I felt it was really hard for me because I was not familiarized with the cards, and actually even new sets were very, very, very overwhelming. It's a ton of cards, so as you familiarize with Magic, you start being able to get some cards, like a short description of the cards ingrained in your head, and as you are able to do that, and as you're like as you watch championships that occur like during the weekends, you start getting into contact with a lot of the cards, recognizing how the matchups work and stuff like that, and that kind of starts making it easier. Otherwise, it's a complete mess, and you're leaving a lot of percentage points on the table. Expose myself, yeah, and the thing about deliberate practice is this: you expose yourself to many situations in slightly different scenarios, and by in the end, looking back, retrospecting into your mistakes and understanding how could you do things better, that can definitely help. This is actually something that I've been doing more or less consistently. When I'm like looking for highlights on my streams, I'm actually doing two things. I'm doing that, and I'm looking into my gameplay and try to understand where I could have done better. And it's very easy to identify a lot of plays that are suboptimal. Understanding the opponent is also something, and this goes back to the things that we mentioned before. Understanding the opponent and playing the mind game part of Magic is also very, very important. There's that level 0 to 3 players that we keep on discussing. This is something that LSV mentions from time to time. There's like level 0, you know Magic cards, you know what they do, so you know how to play them without breaking the rules of the game. Level 1, you actually design a plan. Level 2, you know that your opponent is designing a plan, and you try to interact with that. And level 3 is you know that your opponent knows that you have a plan, so you can actually misguide them, misdirect them, bluff sometimes, because you recognize you have a thinking human being in front of you, and reaching that stage is not trivial. Sigma is saying knowing the meta will help you. I'm just recapping what he's saying previously. Knowing the meta will help you to think ahead when fighting an opponent playing high meta decks. For sure, we already discussed that. Yes. Well, we discussed that in consequence of he mentioning it. So that's one of the reasons I don't play much historic. Standards meta is much more predictable. If you don't master standard, it's much more difficult when you move to formats with bigger card pools. That's definitely correct, and that's I've been like, even this weekend, Star City Games tournaments are in historic. I was almost crafting a Jund sacrifice deck during the week, but I don't want to get right now into historic. I barely have a notion of how to play in standard, I guess. So let's take things step by step, and this is also something. This goes a bit beyond the article, but taking things step by step, breaking them down. There's like this heuristic divide and conquer, right? If you have a big issue, you try to divide it into smaller issues that you can tackle. If they're still big enough, too big, you break them down again and again and again until the point that you can actually tackle them. So right now I'm starting to tackle standard more and more, but that's definitely very important. Actually, in what regards paper play, I built decks for Pioneer and Modern, and at the beginning it was overwhelming as hell, because you don't know when your opponents are doing some crazy stuff in front of you, and you don't even know the cards, you don't have time to read them. It's really challenging, but you start recognizing some patterns. But still, I'm like 5% or 1% into the modern format, for example. It's huge. It's a huge thing. But still, and this actually gets us back to something that we discussed in the past. I actually use Nikachu's articles and videos and stuff like that to get familiarized with modern meta and understand how should one tackle the meta game. How can you actually gear your deck towards when some decks are the most prevalent in the meta, for example. How should you play against that? And you get a lot of value, even though it's a huge format. Yes. There is still a relatively manageable metagame. Well, if you're brewing weird stuff, you will face some challenges, but yeah, it's still manageable, and understanding using whatever format that you want to play. And I invested in those because those are non-rotating formats, right? It's very, very useful for you. So in the next section, Paulo actually interviews a few of the top players at the time and asks them what do they think that are the qualities that most distinguish them, or that most distinguish good players from great players. What qualities do they have that makes them great, and what qualities do they lack, right? He actually did this because, this is very interesting, because he really thought that arguing that, oh, but a great player is one that has designs good plans, that has a good grasp on the fundamental strategy of Magic, that is able to design a plan and tie that plan again with the technical gameplay, moment-to-moment gameplay, right? But it's all fine and good arguing that, because that would categorize Paulo as a great player, and he is a great player, but you should not be that biased. Like, maybe what defines a great player is making very few mistakes. So Paulo would not be a great player in that sense. So it's really interesting, and Paulo is very good at this, understanding his own bias, realizing those biases and working around them. We reviewed an awesome article from him on that, one that was probably the one that taught me the most, on 8 biases and how you can improve on them or something like that. I don't recall exactly the title, but there will be a link in the YouTube video for that, because that's already live. So first there's the statement from Owen Turtenwald, and I might butcher some of these names, that's life. But yeah, I think this player got out of the professional scene because of some issues, but we don't care about that. We're looking into gameplay and strategy and that stuff. So at the time, he was one of the most prominent players in the Magic scene. So in terms of things that he really values, he values attention to detail. Again, this is a bit tied to stuff that we discussed previously, but attention to detail is really crucial for you to, like, it only works if you have a good way to fit into your brain the game state, right? And this is something incremental. You start ingesting into your brain the game state, and your brain is constantly trying to make connections between the cards, between the effects, all that stuff. But it's very, very easy to lose track of the small details of that seemingly inconsequential ability that your opponent has on a land, and at some point it wins you the game, right? So looking at the lands, understanding everything that is happening, understanding like the small pauses that your opponent makes before after attacks, for example, or in your turn, those small things they actually tell you a story, right? And I think if we didn't, we will review an article on that. Like, you're constantly telling a story and your opponent is telling a story, so every single detail matters. In terms of things that he thinks is better at, making good plays each turn. I try to have a vision for how the game will play out. So it's about this, having a plan, tying everything together. We already discussed that. What the most likely way I win looks like. So yeah, it's a retroactive process, right? You first try to understand how can you actually, you want to win the game, that's a given. You try to understand how can you reach that stage, what's the most likely situation where you win the game, and then you work backwards. Okay, what's the plan, what's the play to make that guides me towards that plan, and so on and so forth. So you go back then, and then you go forward in the mental process, let's say. The thing that this says is worse at is deck selection. And well, this is something, it's definitely hard, and it's actually very interesting, the weights that you should give to deck selection between MPL tournaments and Star City Games tournament, or even smaller tournaments than that, the classifiers, I mean. So there's different ways that you should approach each of those situations, and actually depending on whom else you're playing against. So if the pool of competitors, of players, is large, you're more likely to face a metagame that represents very well the previous week's metagame, the previous weekend's metagame. If it is very narrow, like the MPL players or the Rivals League or whatever, it's much more likely for players to try to double down on the metagame analysis. So there was this metagame, what decks win against that metagame, and then what decks are good both against the metagame and as against the decks that are good against the metagame. So it starts getting a bit contrived, but if you're able to do that sort of analysis, that's great. But in order to do an effective analysis of that without losing too much time, you actually need to have, again, good grasp on fundamentals. Why do these decks actually work together? So Sigma says yes, like my misplay against you when I activated the Faceless Haven, that just arrived to the battlefield because it doesn't show the summoning sickness. Exactly. Yeah, there are a lot of those small mistakes. You should just, well, don't ruminate on them. It's very easy to ruminate on mistakes, even more on small mistakes that cost you like the third game on a single elimination tournament or something like that. But it's just recognize that and move forward. Sam Black, who's been, well, I wasn't really familiarized, come on, cancel. I wasn't really familiarized with Sam until he started pushing the Drafting Archetypes podcast. And Sam is someone that is very, 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 very good at grasping the fundamentals. He's able to, like, I think it was pretty funny. He pushed a podcast episode on elves for Kaldheim Limited before the set was out, so just based on the spoilers, and he was already able to understand how the cards would interact, what should you prioritize. You should actually and I'm not saying that other players can't do that to some extent, but he ties very well the high level to the low level gameplay decisions that you're actually making, right? So, thing that he values, or that he thinks that distinguishes good players from great, it's more about having the right mindset for it. And I think this is a pretty interesting answer, because having the right mindset, and this is something that everyone is able to get into, it's what enables you to keep on growing, to keep on improving yourself, and ultimately reach a stage where you're just very, very good. It's even more interesting because if you typically you have the right mindset, if you have the right mindset, you're doing two things, and having the right mindset is actually dependent on you finding pleasure in Magic, because if you do find pleasure in playing Magic, you're already likely to have the base skill set that the game requires. So you are a curious person, you like strategic thinking, and you will actually spend more time practicing that interest. So I think it's pretty interesting, because you will spend more time by having the right mindset, and you are already, if you're in this mindset, you already have the required abilities to start to get you in a good position where you can improve. The most important points are what everyone says, of course: practice, challenging yourself, being really dedicated to succeed, and this is through time. So but the frame of mind is something that he keeps getting back at. Something that he also mentions, again, an amazing point, is humility. And humility, and not attributing just to variance your bad luck or your losses, right? When you lose, you should still take responsibility. Not all your losses are due to your skill level, right? But you can do stuff, even when it's due to variance, you can do stuff, right? Do you need to change the deck? Do you need to change the way you play? Do you need to change the the sideboard plan. So it's all about problems and circumstances. Even when you lose due to variance, there will still likely be points of improvement that you can find and you can tweak for next time. So and again, these problems versus circumstances, if you're not familiar with it, we discuss that from time to time. It's like problems are stuff that you can actually are actionable, so you can work on them, you can improve those and essentially remove the problems out of your way. And circumstances are variables from the environment, right? Are things that condition what you can actually do. For example, and I give always that example, the pandemic. The pandemic, it's a circumstance, right? You can still do stuff, but given those constraints, what can you do? How can you change the things? Because stalling and saying, oh damn, now I cannot go to my LGS, and I really liked it, was the only way I practice Magic. Yeah, but maybe there are ways to go around that, right? So listen to ideas that diverge from your own, and truly listen. It's not only that small reinforcements, no, it's really listen to others' ideas, reevaluate when someone does something different than you do, and this is something that I get back to, like the example of watching Ben Stark videos on YouTube and pausing, try to understand what you would do differently and why did he do that. That's really interesting. And regarding humility, it's more about, this is something that probably everyone can relate to, even the ones that don't really find themselves as a very humble person. So you have to believe that you're not already as good as you can get, right? I think that this is kind of obvious, but yeah. Again, second point is what distinguishes him, and we already discussed that in a way, forming a long-term vision of how a draft deck might come together. And well, draft deck, he focuses on drafts because he doesn't really like to be constantly playing just the meta decks that's something that's very common in constructed, right? Yeah, drafting archetypes, we already discussed that. We do a lot of publicity for his podcast in this stream, for sure. How a matchup might play out, and he's able to do all this stuff in his head without even playing a game. It's very funny, very impressive, I would say. Very willing to take risks, and I'm very willing to lose. And this is something he keeps on mentioning this on his podcast, and I find this very interesting because he will put himself in losing positions just for the sake of learning, because those positions will be positions where he can learn the most. And this is something that is probably hard for people to actually grasp. Like, one of the things that you should do when you're familiarizing yourself to a deck, or that you slightly brew, that you made some changes and you try to stuff around. So probably you should mulligan less. Probably you should have more cards of the new card available, so that you play more with them and and you understand their impact in the game. So there's this exploration stage before the exploitation stage that you should still spend some time in, and that's something to consider. And you might lose more, yes, but that will improve your chances of winning more when you're in exploiting mode. It's all about exploration. Losing is the best way to learn. Yeah, and this is something very interesting. You might at the extreme start being happy by losing. It all depends. Some losses doesn't really make sense. We were actually discussing that with Sigma on our Discord one of these days. So some losses are just, well, you can do much, but you might be happy to lose a game sometimes, and that's that's liberating, I think. Model and he also thinks that he has a good model of how people think in general, and again this goes into the mind portion of the game. There are a few big ones that he that he points out as like things that he could improve in. The patience to just grind matches with a known good deck, as we're already discussing this, but this is something that it's still important to mention. Resilience and understanding that you won't only be doing what you find enjoyment in is critical skill for being successful. So this resilience, and I felt a lot this when I got into the profession, into my professional career as a data scientist, because it's all wonderful when you're in university, in college, and you're, like in my case, building some machine learning models, learning new algorithms. Yeah, that's all fine and good, but in the real world, you'll be solving, it's like what's known as data plumbing. You're preparing data, you're actually implementing some systems on doing some engineering to have some pipeline set up. And so actually training machine learning models is actually a very, very tiny slice of your day-to-day tasks as a professional data scientist. And you need to be willing to do that stuff. Otherwise, you will be jumping from job to job and never finding your place. So some degree of resilience and going through the grinding process, that's still very valuable, and that's still something that you should try to pursue. And it's also something that you should probably try to pursue with your kids. There's some video games that are amazing for developing these sort of skills. Like one of these days I was watching a streamer playing Crash Bandicoot. It's an amazing game for training your resilience, let me just say that. Raw processing power isn't as great as the best players, like keeping the board state and very complicated board states and understanding what you can do and all that stuff. But he counterweights that with having a robust intuition. It can work as a backup plan, but it doesn't always work, right? So we have a few others. I'll try to make this a bit faster, maybe, but if it's being interesting, I don't care. Alexander Hayne, I actually don't know this player, but I need to explore a bit. So what he thinks that great players do is think outside the box more. They consider, they don't accept common sense knowledge, and you might have been identifying that in some of the other players that we discussed above, right? They consider how their opponent might play and makes plays that use that fact that their opponent is thinking about what cards they might have. So this is all about level 3, being a level 3 player, right? Good players play their game and play it well, but great players also play the opponent's game, right? They try to get into the perspective of the other person and, okay, how would I see myself in this like inception moment, understand how can they misdirect the opponent, right? Make an objective worse play in a vacuum. This leads to these situations where you make an objectively worse play in a vacuum, but one that causes their opponent to make an even worse one, right? I think it's better long-term strategy and planning. Again, he gets back to this. This is a very recurring topic. Something that he points out is relatively weak at drafting, knowing how to evaluate cards, recognizing signals, and all those small things on drafts are very important, and they definitely are. And those are maybe the things that are most particular to drafting that you don't see that much in constructed. Yeah, and he also mentions that he misses these small but important details because he's more of a high-level player. And you start seeing this being quite common, right? The players that have more high-level strategic planning ability, they tend to make some silly mistakes, right? So some pointed mistakes, as Paulo puts it. Kenji Tsumara, so he really values continuity, and by continuity, this is related to reliability or consistency throughout the tournaments, throughout the years. And a great player also never forgets their mistakes, and they can adjust for those mistakes to set to the new set or card. This is all about the understanding the fundamental principles, which enable you to extrapolate to new realities, new sets, new cards, new metas, all that stuff. Not repeating the same mistake in a similar situation with new cards is very hard for most of us, for sure. Something he considers he's good at is play speed. Be careful about that, because it might be a trap, but it might also be a way to pressure your opponent, right? It's something that, at least for me in my initial tournaments, and maybe even now, I don't know, if I have an opponent that is playing very fast and is maybe even shuffling the cards and whatever on their end, and really having a lot of noise to my input, to my senses, that might make me more agitated, more agitated. So I might make more mistakes due to that. So it might be a trap, but it's also something that you can use to your own advantage. So something that he says is a weakness of him is the ability to extrapolate, or the imagination, that is the ability to extrapolate from fundamentals, right? So it's pretty funny. He looks very different from a different profile from Paulo, for example, but is still a very good player. Yuuya Watanabe, thing that he values: never miss their opportunity because they know how to overcome difficulties. So this is all about, since Magic is a numbers game, you need some consistency to be constantly exposed to opportunities to get lucky, right? You might still get lucky, like I just submit to myself to a random an entry to a random tournament, and I actually win it. Yeah, that's all fine and good, but that won't make you a good player. You might just got lucky in that situation. A lot of other players, or everyone that faces that situation, most of the other as good or better players find themselves in situations where they need to expose themselves to these opportunities to be good, to get lucky, to happen. Yeah, that's quite interesting. That's something that should be really interesting to explore further. They have like a meta game of themselves, I believe, from small pieces that I've been gathering, but it's still something that I'm not really knowledgeable on. But yeah, the only thing that I know is that they actually, at the end of a big tournament, the winner had already the prize on their hands or something, and someone questioned a play. There was a play that might be, I think it was illegal or something, and they actually he dropped the prize. The winner agreed on getting back to that situation because it was identified really as an illegal play, and getting back to that situation, like everything, and continuing the game from then onwards, and he actually ended up losing the game. So he had the prize on his hand, but he agreed on getting back to the game and actually doing things as they should. This is very, very interesting. I feel like it's completely different here in the West. Control their emotions perfectly. I guess this is also something that they seem to excel at. Something that he excels is understanding my weaknesses and strengths. So be true about your. Is true to himself, I guess. And this is something that might be quite hard. You might be convincing yourself of some things. That you are this or that, either that's good or bad, and you're an individual that is actually always improving or actually not, but you're always changing, right? So taking for granted something about you, that's probably not the best way for you to grow, right? Growth mindset really goes a long way if you practice it deliberately. Understanding your play style, and yeah, this is good because sometimes if you're more geared towards a play style, like you're a very good control player or something, you might get some value out of that, but on the other hand, it's still adaptability is often preferred. You might still get some wins when you might still get some nice results when the meta is aligned to your skills, but that's not always the case. Something that he says he needs to improve on is in English. Jacob Wilson. I don't see this player for a while. Maybe I'm just not watching that much tournaments, I guess. So something that he values is adaptation to each decision or situation as a new and unique circumstance arrive. We already discussed things related to that. Think theoretically about the game of Magic rather than evaluating exactly what is in front of you. Again, fundamentals, being able to extrapolate. Because this will be what enables you to be flexible, to adapt to new scenarios. It's highly unlikely, or it's virtually impossible for you to face the exact same scenario twice, unless you you put the cards on the table in exactly the same situation. Playing different, something that he says is good at, is playing differently against bad players. Growth mindset. I actually found it very funny that he says, I do not think I'm the best player in the world yet, so growth mindset for the win, but he thinks he's very good even at bluffing against bad players or unknown players. So that's something that you should be careful about, because if people are not, so being a level 3, playing as a level 3 player using the definitions from above, and not against an opponent that is not a level 2 player, is a level 1. So if they're not thinking about your game plan, why the hell are you trying to bluff stuff and make suboptimal plays because your opponent isn't even noticing them? So you're attacking with a 2-2, but you don't have a pump spell, and they have a 5-5, an amazing 5-5, for example. They might just block and don't care about you being bluffing a pump spell or whatever. Sure, Sigma. Thank you very much for joining us. It's really a pleasure and participating in the discussion. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely make this available. It's recording for 1 hour already, but I think it's really interesting to dissect these articles, because it's also the most effective way for one to grow their knowledge and to learn to grow, right? And this is something that I probably will write about in the future, but a key principle for me on learning is be exposed to the same concept from multiple different perspectives, because different perspectives will link that concept to different things, and you have a stronger grasp on a concept the more times you're exposed at it, and the more connections to other things you have in your brain, because your brain's memory works like for the programmers out there, it's like a mapping tool. You need a key, you need a trigger to, generally speaking, trigger your memory, and it's very good at that, but you need the keys, right? So if you diversify those keys, those chances of retrieving that concept, you maximize the chances of actually applying what you learned. So this is something very interesting, and probably I'll write a bit on that in the future. So Jacob Wilson, yeah, we already saw that. Bluffing, we discussed that. Something he mentions that he needs to work on is level addedness or focus. And yeah, I feel that a lot. Kai Booth, as Sigma was saying, he was a favorite player of his back in the times. He's still playing a lot, right? But yeah, he's a very good player, a German player, I believe, who's very consistent, I think. And something he mentions as a key attribute of great players is keep composure during high pressure situations. And it's very, very easy to, in a single elimination draft or whatever, tournament, it's very easy to drop on the floor a lot of your percentage points just because you're feeling the pressure and you need to play and whatever. So the way that I find best to improve in this is twofold. So first, you need to change the way you approach these situations, like whatever makes you feel comfortable, right? You might develop a routine prior to these tournaments that gets you in the mood for the tournament. You might whatever. Yeah, I guess a routine is a good example, and it's very common in sports. By the way, a lot of people just listen to that same song before a game, before a performance, whatever. That's common. Something on top of that, you should actually be exposed to these situations as often as possible, right? Because by being exposed, you will keep on improving at it. Moving on. So something that he thinks he's good at, well, it's keeping composure in high pressure situations. So he kind of falls into that trap of that Paulo was afraid that he was falling into, which is the thing that he thinks distinguishes great players from good players is the main attribute of himself. So that's interesting. And I had great players to play against. Yeah, something that he also mentions is be able to be exposed to great players and play against them in a regular basis, because there's that thing about people thinking that they like the best player at a given LGS, but if the level field of that LGS is quite low, that player is not that good. But so if he goes to a GP or something and loses quickly, he might have went to that GP with completely the wrong expectations, and expectations are very important for consistency, I believe. I've been told that multiple people, so in terms of shortcomings, give too much away when playing Magic. I guess like he showcases what he's thinking or something like that. But yeah, Shenhar, I think he was the one of the youngest, if not the youngest ever world champion at some point, and he actually, I think, is the only one back-to-back world champion in Magic. So this guy is bonkers. There's a very interesting list of videos on Wizards YouTube channel. and one of the episodes is on Shahar Shenhar. I think a very good player is networking, so playing with better people than themselves, because that way you can learn a lot. If you're humble enough, you put yourself in positions to learn a lot. So to be honest, something that he says he needs to work on, or a shortcoming of his, is the better he does, the less committed he feels. And I guess this sort of happened, and this can be kind of an issue with early success. If you don't need to develop a robust not partnership but relationship with the game, you might just feel, okay, I won everything, so next thing, right? So that's something to consider. And the last one is LSV, Luis Scott-Vargas. Something that, and I guess he is very aligned with Paulo in this aspect. Something that distinguishes great players, or something that he says is, good players play cards, great players play games. Again, this goes back to our to these plans, right? To keeping a plan across multiple layers of the thing. And actually this is a nice t-shirt quote. People may, and I'll just read this part because I think it's really interesting. People may understand that in some matchups they are the beatdown, and in others they are the controlling player. But that still doesn't mean they've made the leap from casting whatever seems to be the best on a given turn, to planning out the game and always making plays to further that plan. This is a very long sentence, but I think it's really, really interesting, because sometimes you might understand, oh, now I'm the aggressor, or because I'm on the play, even though my deck actually prefers to not be the aggressor. Whatever that means, you might still do the same plays instead of aligning your plays against your plan. You should know why you're making a play, so having a reasoning behind that is tied to a plan and stuff like that. And the second point, well, the point that he mentions most distinguishes him is that thing. It's about identifying good plans, especially when those good plans aren't common strategies. He's also good at paying attention to detail. I guess that's a very, very good combination of skills, right? Because as we were seeing, most of the players that focus on the high level stuff are not that good at identifying the issues in the details, or the misplays, the pointed misplays. So he's very interesting on that. And he also leans on his subconscious a lot, because he played a lot of Magic throughout his life. But yeah, it's very important that stage only comes after you explore the game meaningfully. Yeah, and his shortcoming, he says that it's exactly because he plays a lot intuitively that he left some value, he loses some value on the table when playing Magic. This is also related to playing very fast, so I guess there's also some pointed mistakes that he makes because of that. So having a plan is definitely something mentioned a lot, and as a conclusion there's a list of 4 items for one to like put in a post-it and and keep around if one's trying to improve at Magic and elsewhere. So point number 1 is have a plan. Again, through multiple stages. It's not only a plan when you're playing, but that plan should also be informed by how you built your deck, how you built your sideboard, what's the meta game, what's your plan in terms of relationship to Magic, whatever, all that stuff. Second comes adjust to new situations, so be flexible, have a good grasp of the fundamentals and be able to extrapolate from those fundamentals to new situations. Understand the why as opposed to the what. This is also a nice sentence for a t-shirt, and Samuel Black is a god at this, as we were discussing, because the what will change but the why will not, and if you know the why you can extrapolate to new situations, right? right? Third, pay attention to detail. And again, this it might be hard to pair with the other ones, but it's also you should recognize it that it's a skill that you can also work on, and you just need to identify, to essentially design a plan. If you are good at designing plans, design a plan to tackle the attention to details, right? Leave right lands untapped, don't forget to use our abilities, that kind of stuff. And something very interesting, I felt this a lot when I started playing Paper. I just played very few games on Arena, but Arena favors a style of gameplay that is much more fast-paced because of the auto-tapper, the button to skip the turn, to bluff not having some kind of interaction, whatever. I feel like once I get back at playing Paper Magic, I will make these mistakes like the first time again, and it's hard to overcome that when you're playing with Arena. I think that Magic Online falls into that trap a bit less. And networking, this was something mentioned only, I believe, not only by Shahar Shenhar, but by Kai Budde too. But networking is crucial. You get surrounded yourself by good players. That's what I'm trying to do in these streams and by joining other streams. But if you breathe and discuss and everyone is aligned in terms of objectives, it makes it much more likely for you to get into a stage or get to the next level, I think. Okay, so that's the article for today. Today's review was a very long one, but I think it was definitely worth it. Paulo's articles typically have a lot to unpack in them, even though they're written in a very simple language, accessible, I guess. Not simple, it's accessible, right? But it's very interesting. So, how did you find today's level up? I hope that you learned and liked it at least more than Elsa did. You can find the link for the original in the video description down below. If you like this kind of content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. That also helps spreading out the word and helping as many Magic players as possible. And on top of that, it also means the world to me. Also, let me know in the comment section down below what are you working on or what do you want to work on to take your game to the next level. We might just gear our future level up reviews towards that. I do also stream on Twitch, so if you want to interact with me live, head over to twitch.tv/DiogoJapinto. We're building an awesome community in there, and we would definitely love to have you around. Thank you for joining, and see you next time. Planeswalking out!